Good evening and welcome to another evening in the Lake District. This evening you find me in Bassenthwaite in the Northern Lakes, just alongside the A66, which possibly you can hear behind me. If you can hear me at all through the wind noise, it is really quite windy here at the moment. I'm hoping you can hear me. Apologies if you can't hear me very well. But I'll start off with Bassenthwaite is in fact the answer to one of the fairly common trivia questions that you get asked in pub quizzes around here. Bassenthwaite is in fact the only lake in the Lake District. Everything else is either a tarn, a mere or a water. Bassenthwaite Lake is the only lake. It's a beautiful spot, and if you saw my first video in this series, which I'll link to there, I was talking about why I think it's really important and useful and valuable to shoot iconic images, to come to places that have been photographed a million times before, and to try to see what you can do with those locations, to see if you can compare your shots to the wow shots that you've seen other people doing, and in doing so learn a whole lot about the mechanics of photography, and in the process learn a lot about what kind of photographer you are. This is the journey that I'm starting out on myself, and I'm hoping that if you find it useful, you'll come and join me and let me know how you get on your journey to being a landscape photographer. I'm hoping this evening, the reason I've come to Bassenthwaite really is, it is one of those iconic shots. Come to a spot around halfway along on the eastern shore, and there are classic views here, either shooting southward towards Keswick or northwards back towards Cockermouth. Over on this side we have the massive, great, impressive hulk of Skiddaw, with Dodd nestling in beside it. This evening Skiddaw is actually, let me see if I can turn you around here for a moment, because this evening Skiddaw is in fact not wreathed in its own weather system. There's about 20 days a year when you can actually see Skiddaw's summit from the ground. The rest of the time it's swathed in cloud. But as you can also see behind me, today is not a windless evening. The classic shot here is if you can get here either in the morning or the evening, doesn't matter which, the sun rises and sets at either end. But if you can come on a windless day when the surface is absolutely flat and calm, then the reflections are just magical and absolutely wonderful. Either of Skiddaw and Dodd right across the other side of the lake. We're at a fairly narrow point on the lake here. Or at either end, the landscapes are just wonderful. The fells beyond Keswick, reflected in the lake, early morning, crisp in the autumn, beautiful, beautiful shot. We've seen it 100 times and looking forward to capturing it at some point over this autumn. But it's windy today and there are no reflections, and I'm struggling a bit. The sky is really interesting. Southward over Keswick, the cloud formations and the colours and the depth are really dramatic and really impressive. But to be honest, I'm struggling to put something in the foreground to make them interesting. Without a foreground interest, what you've got is a distant landscape and some water, and the classic shots don't work. The classic shots depend, if you like, on having that reflection. I have tried. I'm here about an hour before sunset, and I'm waiting until the sun drops behind me, so that the idea, the hope is that at some point the side lighting on Skiddaw and on the fells behind would be really useful and impressive to shoot. But in the meantime, I went a little bit towards the south and I caught a few shots of some really dramatic cloud formations and lighting on the fells beyond, with a little bit of foreground interest. At this point, if those shots are any good, I will drop them in and you can see them. Otherwise, let's move along, and the less said the better. So I'm going to hang out here for a little while. The wind is blowing, the sky is moving. The cloud formations behind me are actually reasonably serene and consistent, whereas to the south they're really dramatic. We'll see how it goes. If something happens, then I'll shoot it. If something doesn't, then I won't. But I did want to take the opportunity to reflect on the last video where I was talking about iconic images, and I was shooting, if you remember, at a classic shot of an old concrete jetty just outside Keswick. Once I'd done that, I went around the lake a little bit, the other side of Keswick, to get a couple of shots that aren't necessarily iconic. There is a fallen tree, a tree log that's been there for a couple of years, and I've come on holidays and seen it. I thought, that might make an interesting photograph. Looks a bit like an alien crawling out of the water. And a couple of other shots, and just as I was heading back to the car, the sky exploded for about 10 minutes in the most amazing light show as the sun dipped below. And I didn't include those photographs in the last video, so I'm going to take the opportunity, on the grounds that I might not get a shot here today, to drop those shots in for you now. Let's see what you think. So I've gone handheld for a little bit because things have been moving quite quickly. I've come around a little bit to find a different composition here. I've got this lovely oak tree that's separated from the rest of the trees on the lakeshore there, and I've got Skiddaw and Dodd in the background on the other side of the lake. And a little while ago, just as the sun started dipping below the clouds, the light started to creep across Skiddaw in the most beautiful way. And what I've done is I've moved around to try to capture that. I've got the tree on the right hand side of the composition. I've got Skiddaw obviously and the light on it in the background. I'm not that happy with it because there's a lot of grass here in the foreground which I can't really get it high enough to remove. But I'm hoping that this little footpath that you can see coming in from the bottom corner will give it some kind of direction and some kind of purpose in the image, because otherwise it's just grass. There's a few rocks there under the trees that you can see, but there's an awful lot of grass here. I might need to crop it down. We'll see when I get it back in Luminar and see what I can do. I was hoping that as the sun went lower, that the clouds, which are kind of grey and not very colourful, would have, caught some light, but it looks very much as though the sun has gone behind the ridges here behind me, and so that light doesn't appear to be forthcoming. I'm going to hang around for another 10 or 15 minutes maybe to see what happens with that, but otherwise I think Bassenthwaite has been an experience. I'll come back when I get a crisp, calm, windless morning to see what I can do with those reflections, and I'll show you that in a future video, definitely, because it's just such a beautiful spot. It's not quite the full Lake District experience with the A66 just a dozen yards or so there behind me. We've got a lot of traffic noise, but it's a wonderful looking place. And now that the ospreys have gone, a lot of the twitchers have left, and so it'll be a little bit quieter at that time of the morning. I will come back and I will show you that again, but if I've got something decent out of this one, I'll put those up and I'll show you them now. Hopefully you'll enjoy. And if you do, or if you've got any other comments on anything that I've been doing in this video, please do shout in the comments below. I'll be delighted to hear from you. I'll be delighted to hear what you think of what I'm trying to do here and whether or not it's of any use to you at all. But in the meantime, it looks as though that's the end of the light for tonight. We're done. I'll see you next time.